All right, hi everyone. It's Dr. Jared Holst here from IronHistory.com. This is my next interview series of Men of Iron, which is interviews I've just been doing with men who've worked their life with weights in one way or another, weightlifting, bodybuilding, collecting history, just to have stories to tell that are super interesting to me, and I love to get them on tape. So today I have an exciting guest. We have Mr. St. John with us, okay? So Bill St. John was a bodybuilder in the late 60s, actually all through the 60s, really, and the early 70s. He also interacted with a lot of the Iron Game personalities and people at York Barbell at the time. He also got to know and I think became friends with Dr. John Ziegler. In this interview, Dr. Ziegler, a lot is not known about him. All people really remember, unfortunately, is his relationship with dianabol, and there was a lot more to the man. And Bill here had gotten to know a lot of the other parts of him, so hopefully we're going to be able to get on record a lot of the other things that made Dr. Ziegler a very interesting man. So thank you for being on here, Mr. St. John, with me. I really appreciate it. So why don't we start out with just telling me kind of when you were born, where you were born, and then kind of get into how you started getting into exercise and weight training.
Well, I was born in Philadelphia in 1942, and from there, we moved to New Jersey, which is right next to Philadelphia, and that was my formative years. When I lived in Philadelphia, I remember as a little boy going to the movies on a Saturday matinee, and end of the feature, they had a running serial, and it was the one that I saw that really left an impression on me was Superman.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the character that they had playing Superman, but I was mesmerized by that. And so I guess it's innate with certain things that happen that are seminal moments in your life.
Yeah.
And that was one of them. And that in mind, when I, like I said, moved to New Jersey and started getting a little bit older, the weight training thing wasn't existent from where we lived.
Of course, yeah.
And nothing was really organized in any big way. But there was one fella in Jersey here in our area that competed. I think he was in a 148-pound class when he first started competing. And I got to, Wayne Johnson was his name, and I got to know him pretty well.
How old were you at the time when that happened?
When I first met him, I guess I was maybe 14 years old.
He was just a guy in the neighborhood, or was it like that? Was there a gym or a place that weights were? Or?
Well, he was in the neighborhood, and he was the only one that really lifted weights and competed in Olympic lifting that they had wherever he had to travel to go into these competitions. And him, besides him, then there was another one that he didn't do any competition at the time and turned out to be successful in bodybuilding, was Val Vasilef. He was in 1964 Mr. America. Well, both of these fellows were older than me. And when I met Wayne Johnson for the first time, he was introduced to me. And at the time, I would just lift weights, and how strong you were is how much weight you can hoist over your head.
Yeah.
And
did you have a weight set at home, or?
Yeah, I had a weight set, just a regular workout set in my basement. And
do you remember what type of weight set it was?
Yeah, it was York.
Okay. Like when they're 110 pound, like a standard set?
110 pound, and then we had extra plates that we'd have, that I'd have on there. And the bar I had was a thick bar. And I remember as I'm talking to you, I didn't even think about this, but to add the extra weights on, the holes weren't the same side where you could put it on this bar. So I had to take a grinder.
Oh, okay.
And ream it out a little bit so I could fit it on there. But whatever you had to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was doing this weight training. Well, I didn't know anything about anything other than I wanted to get stronger. And at this, I guess, a teenage hangout or whatever, this Wayne Johnson was there, and somebody pointed me out to Wayne and said, "See that kid? He was 15 years old." And I remember hearing that Val Vasilef's brother Bob, at 15, could lift 200 pounds over his head. And that was kind of, I guess, an unscientific goal for me.
Okay, it's a strong 15-year-old.
Yeah, well, again, and I was working towards that. So I was able, at still 15 years old, I was able to do 200 pounds over my head. But they pointed me out to this Wayne Johnson, and he, I guess, had me summoned over to him when he was there, and so he says, somebody said, "How you can lift weights? How much can you lift?" I said, "Well, I can lift 200 pounds." And Wayne was very, very smooth. He said, "Well, you're a liar." I said, "Well," and he was an older guy, and I just said, "Well, I can't do it." "Well, what are you doing tomorrow?" And it was going to be a Saturday. And long and the short, they lined it up. "You meet me here at 2 o'clock. And there was a friend of his, another guy that was of the same age that he lifted weights. So he could do pullover, 300 pounds that he could pull over. And I didn't believe that.
Uh-huh. Like a lie on the back, pull over and press type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something in that in a crude fashion. 300 pounds is a heck of a lot of weight for anybody at that time, in my opinion. So, met him there at 2 o'clock, and we go up to his house, and he had a garage that's still standing there, but one-car garage. And the concrete in there was all broken up, I guess, from him doing his weight training and everything. Mm-hmm. And it was very rudimentary, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, we get to work and load the bar up. And this guy, George, did his pullover. I was impressed with that. I really didn't think this fellow could do it. So now we're working up, and I got up to 200 pounds, and I cleaned it, and I jerked it, and he's yelling before I even put the weight down. "That's a continental clean. That's not a fair clean." Well, I didn't know what the heck anything was with the weights.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I didn't know," but he saw that I jerked the weight over, so I gained a tiny bit, I guess, of his respect that I did the 200 pounds. And then, we started talking, and that was my initial entry to somebody that was involved in organized competition, Alabit, local, and that was it.
That's cool.
And then I'm hearing these stories about this guy, Val Vasilef, and how strong he was. And he was kind of, I guess, our Fonzie, if you will. I mean, he showed up. He was like the strongest, the toughest, and he was athletic. He was gifted athletically. He really was.
Sure.
Acrobatics, gymnastics, and he had all that with plus an attitude. And I remember going over with the older guys on a Sunday. Val Vasilef had a weightlifting. He had a weightlifting, but athletically they called it the Cats AMC.
Okay.
Which was the Cats Athletic Motorcycle Club.
Okay.
So it was like, and I remember asking Val after that. I said, "Well, did you ever see the Wild Woman with Marlon Brando?" I saw it 6 times.
Of course.
And he kind of patterned, I guess, attitude and such over that, a little bit over that movie. And
yeah, I mean, nowadays you see that it's somewhat of it's been so overdone, it's almost like a stereotype. But probably when it was first happening, it wasn't a stereotype. That was just the way the cool, tough guy, motorcycle guy acted, right? I mean,
post-Second World War.
Yeah, I mean, that was what was happening then, you know?
Yeah, everybody's trying to find themselves, I guess. And I kind of scrounged the ride off of the older guys that knew me. All right, you can come with it, you know, and it really wasn't.
Were you still around 15 at this time, or?
Yes.
And how old do you think Val was at that time?
Val was 20.
Okay.
He was, you know, I think he was 20, almost 21, I think. But I'd get over there with these fellows on a Sunday. And again, it was all just guys with motorcycles, very disorganized, but there they were. And I get over there now, they got these motorcycles, and they got a barbell there. And I heard guys talking about, you know, with Val went over there to lift him. Well, anyhow, it was kind of interesting to me because there was one fellow that I did know that grew up in our town that in school, of course he was older than me, but in school he was the most athletic, captain of the football team, baseball team, best looking, you know, all that kind of stuff. And all that held gravitas back in those days. Mm-hmm. Well, anyhow, he's there. And he comes over now, they're messing around with the weights for it gets up to 185. Now, this is before I did the 200 pounds, but it gets up to 185 pounds. And he cleans it and he jerks it. You know, well, now I'm just all excited about the activities going on, you know, just some dumb 14-year-old kid. And then I hear somebody saying, "Whoa, how much weight is that?" You know, I turn around and it's Val. And he just looked different with attitude. He said, 185. He said, "Man, that's a lot of weight." He said, "I could try it, but I don't think I can do it." And all these years later, I think he was playing off of me because I had these saucer-sized eyes with the activity going on. And he makes a big thing of it. He said, "Well, I could try it." And this guy said, "Hey, you can do it. I know you can." No, keeps going on. I said, "When the heck is he going to try this thing?" Because he just kept making that noise about it. Well, he gets over now. This guy cleaned it and jerked 185 pounds, which any high school kid in that day, that was pretty good. Well, Val takes the 185 and he cleans it, and he doesn't jerk it. He presses it with one arm. Well, that the die was cast. I want to be this.
Yeah. Was it bent sides, like a kind of a bent press, kind of, or?
Yeah, I guess in a crude fat, whatever.
Whatever it was, he kind of got it up one arm, though.
But he did what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like, if you were good, I was going to blow you off the boards, no matter how good you thought you were, which he did. At least with me.
Yeah.
Accomplished that. And I'm saying, well, now on a follow-up, this guy, Wayne Johnson, that berated me in his garage for doing a continental clean, was part of this club around there. And then when I got to be friendly with Wayne, he told me, he said he heard about these two brothers, and how strong they were and how impressive and everything. And he's organized with the weightlifting, the only one, but he goes over there on a Sunday and he sees them when he in the high school on a Monday. They're asking, "Would you see them guys? Are they anything or what?" He said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "These guys never saw an Olympic bar. I don't know what the heck it is." He said, "And they're, like right there with state records in strength and all this and that." So he's saying, all this strength, he said, you want to go into a contest, nah, they didn't care, And finally he told him, he said, as good as you are, he said, you can do well. You would do well. So anyhow, they had a contest, an Olympic weightlifting contest down in, which wasn't far, down in Wilmington, Delaware at the YMCA.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks Val and his brother into going down there. So now they get down.
You're there too?
No.
No.
This was, I wasn't allowed to hang out with these guys were too old. I was too young.
Gotcha.
No. But anyhow, he enters him into the competition. And Val went into it as in the 181-pound class. And I don't know what his brother did. But anyhow, they get down there to Wilmington. And how I know this, because this Jim Messer, who was the guiding light of Olympic lifting in Pennsylvania, was there. An older man, nice man. He's the one who told me the story. He was there. He said, well, these two guys come down. He said, making a lot of noise and showing off. And there was Val's brother Bob. He's showing guys that he could do handstand push-ups, and he's doing them for repetitions.
Mm-hmm.
And Val never saw an Olympic set. Well, he's trying it out. He was doing like 300 pounds over his head.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but he's showing off.
Yeah.
It comes to the first attempt in the press, and he misses on 3 attempts. Now he's leaving, and Jim Messer, I'm kind of juxtaposing this story. Jim Messer told me the story years later, but I didn't forget stuff like this because it was important to me, and I just thought it was so cool. And Jim's sitting there, and there's another judge telling him, he says, he said, guys come down. They start off more than they can do. He says, and just waste their time or waste our time with this, and he was berating to Jim Messer about these show-offs. But he didn't know. And Jim told me himself. He said, listen, I would normally agree with you. He said, but the raw strength that this kid has, he said, but we're going to talk a little later. He says, I want to catch up to him before they leave. And Jim's telling me, he said, they're leaving. He stopped him. He said, listen. He said, you did everything all wrong. He says, you went down here, he says, and you're showing fellow lifters what you can do. He says, and by the time it came down to the real deal, where you had to lift, he said, you were so tired and beaten. He says, may I give you some advice? Mm-hmm. He said, make your last warm-up your first attempt in lifting. That way you're established and you can compete in, at that time, the 3 Olympic lifts. And he said, I have a competition coming up in Norristown, Pennsylvania. He says, and I would advise you to do the things I tell you to do, is to don't burn yourself out. He said, and you come up there, he says, and I think if you do that, you might do okay. And Val's brother Bob, he didn't give a damn. He just, off he went. But Val, his ego was wounded, where people looking at him like he's just a fake. And he listened to Jim. And he goes up to Norristown, but before Jim Messer was he was an official with the AAU and everything, and he saw Bob Hoffman of York Barbell at the AAU meeting that they always held in Philadelphia monthly.
Okay.
So you had the weightlifting, you had all the other sports with the officials would be at these meetings on and off.
Mm-hmm.
But Jim was there, and Bob Hoffman was religious with that. It meant a lot to him. He always went to those meetings. Well, Jim sees him. They knew each other well. And he kind of told him loosely the story. He said, this kid's got some raw strength. He said, you know, if you're in the area, he says, you want to see something. He says, he might have something that would be of interest to us.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Bob Hoffman shows up, and he brought along with him Bill March, March was pretty well noted at that time. And they get there to the competition. Well, Val followed his advice. So he won the competition, his weight class, and won best lifter, the coefficient between how much he weighed and how much he was lifting. Yeah. And Hoffman even dropped a byline, I guess, in Strength and Health magazine. He said, yeah, I saw this kid, blah, blah, blah. He said, he even wore these shoes look like desert boots, he called them. Mm-hmm. Suede, you know, and had no science to them.
Yeah.
You know, but there he won the competition. And that was where Val started. And
is Val from that area? Because, you know, he's later on when he was all promotions, the Russian Bear and all this stuff. And did he have ancestry there, or was he born in Jersey, or that you know of?
Is born. He came in from New York. Okay. And he was Russian, and Val for the longest time he'd say he was Latvian and Bulgarian because of the Cold War and the stigma and maybe the prejudice he perceived with being Russian. Mm-hmm. But then he embraced it years later with the Russian Bear and all that kind of stuff. But that's where he came from, New York, and he moved to Jersey. And his is a story in itself. And John Dellinger did a story on Val. And,
yes, I've read it, yeah.
And it was kind of interesting because they weren't poor. They made poor people look like the well-to-do in the neighborhood. I mean, they had nothing. Mm-hmm. And Val's father got hurt and wandered. I don't really know the whole story myself on that, but it was just the mother and Val's two sisters and his brother, and just trying to make it. And at that time, there was no welfare or anything to help the destitute, you know, and they were just making it any which way they could. And so I think that besides that experience, it might have set Val with an attitude, if you will, and it kind of served him well.
The real rags to riches story and all that. Yeah.
From me being in the area, and then I became friendly with, I was going through this gigantic car complex, this car dealership. They sold different models and makes and everything, but it was a big one and still in this area. But I was going through there. I was, you know, I'm jumping around between years and everything, but I'm going through there one time, and this fellow stops me. He says, you lift weights, you compete. He says, and you're friends with Val Vasilef. I said, yeah. And he was the manager of the whole place. He said, I was in grade school with Val. And he started telling me, so I get all these
stories from there,
different stories, right? He said, the thing is, he said, he was interesting. He said, you know, we're talking about the attitude and everything. He said he was in 6th grade. He says, and you know, in grade school, a year's difference is a big deal. He was in 6th grade, and he could beat up anybody in the 8th grade. He said,
that's a barometer.
Yeah, he said he was just attitude the whole way. He said, but I've never seen anybody as gifted as he was growing up. He said, with his hand balancing, and he'd watch somebody do something, and he would have it down pat within a week, in some type of feat of strength or whatever. And again, jumping around the story, I remember hearing the one, and they had in those days in these small towns, the carnivals that come around, and they had this these two carnival guys that were kind of pseudo strongmen and different thing. They'd be able to challenge the rubes from different towns of what they could do and everything. Well, they stumble into Val and his brother, and they somehow challenged them. I remember Val telling me the story, but this other fellow was, I don't know if he witnessed to it, but he talked about it, where they challenged them that they could do, if they could do anything, versus what Val and Bob could do. And one of them was they would follow, if they could do everything Val and his brother could do, what these guys could do in hand balancing and walking on their hands and doing flips and stuff like that. And Val told me this story. His brother was walked more barefoot than he did with shoes on when he was younger.
Okay.
But and Val told me, he said, my brother was crazy. He says, I wouldn't do this. But Bob was able to stand on a concrete sidewalk in his bare feet, standing. And like you see somebody scoring a touchdown, they do a backflip in the end zone.
Yeah.
Well, try doing a front flip is harder. Mm-hmm. It's a harder feat. Mm-hmm. Some of them do it, but not many. But anyhow, Bob could stand there on the concrete in his bare feet. And Val told me, he said, Bill, he said, it was just crazy. And he would do a standing front flip on his bare feet. And I said, why was this so crazy? He had to explain it to me.
Yeah.
He said, Bill, he said, you had to hit it perfect. If you overshot it, he said, it scared the hell out of me watching my brother do it. He said, but if you overshot it, he says, and you felt, he said, it could kill you. If you undershot it, you could break your heels, your ankles. He said, it was just insane. And he said, my brother would do it. I said, well, could you do it? He said, the only way I proved it that I could do it, he said, I did it in the surf.
Yeah,
down
that's
at the
better.
shore,
Yeah.
where if I did anything I messed up, I was hitting the water. He says, I proved to myself I could do it. He said, but no, I never, ever tried that. Mm. He said, with that down, he said, Bob was able to do that. He says, and these guys knew enough that was being a maniac. He says, and he said, we bet them at that time $50. He said, in those days, that was all the money in the world. I said, did you win? He said, yeah. He said, we won the bet. He said, all because of my brother being such a maniac.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids that are in grade school age right now, and it's amazing. It's not them, but it's amazing. They're in sports and various sports, and it's amazing how just some kids just have it. I mean, it's innate, the athleticism in some of them.
Yes.
It's really amazing, and it sounds like they're even kind of exceptional. There's definitely stars out there that are born that way, and they're brothers, so I guess it was genetic for sure.
Well, he was just so gifted. I remember seeing him one time, and he just never talked about it. It wasn't like, all I can do, which made it even better. And I saw him one time, he pulls up, it's on a Sunday, it was raining, these kids are playing ball, and he grabs the bat in his neighborhood. And they knew him, but they're just kids, and he said, throw the ball to me. No. I guess they knew, well, obviously he knew his potential. He went up, hit the ball. He hit the ball wet, soggy, well over 300 feet into the woods. And I'm like, where the hell did you learn that? And no matter what he did, if it was interesting or showing off, I guess to a certain degree, he would be able to do it. I mean, and he was good that way. You know, he was strong, and then
So
consequent.
yeah. So that was kind of one of your idols, kind of growing up. It looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
growing up, like I said, you know, because when I'd be lifting weights, you'd have the older guys, and they'd say, "Well, yeah, I don't want to lift weights. Gay guy lift weights at you." Well, Val lifts weights.
Yeah.
And Val would pull up, you know, with a Cadillac Eldorado. I remember with the prettiest girl, and you know, all those kind of things. You know, and he said, "Yeah, I had a Cadillac." He said, "But you know," he said, "I was like a hair's breadth from it being repossessed." He said, "But image was everything."
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing, because I'd always have him to bounce off of, like, well, don't lift weights. When I was in high school, they had a 110-pound weight set behind the cage, sitting there collecting dust, and the coaches would actually tell them, "Don't be messing with them," like the football players or whatever. It makes your muscle bound. Fortunately, we don't hear that anymore. And it was frowned upon, you know, and they not just frowned upon, but don't lift weights if you want to really do anything on the football team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Consequently, again, jumping around the story, I was years and years and years later, I was inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame, and they waited for me for last to which I was glad they did. I was able to put my thoughts together. So they had football players, they had track and field people, they had the whole mix.
Okay.
The guy said, "We never had a weightlifter here," you know.
Which Hall of Fame was that?
Was a local Hall of Fame for sports,
Gotcha.
And it was the mix. And like I said, we had the, you know, pro football players. We even had a boxer. And so anyway, Val was there. Val came to the thing, and my sisters were there. You know, they thought that was
nice,
pretty notable, I guess. But anyhow, when I got up, because everybody kept lauding and thanking this man who competed in the 1940s Olympics, was a runner, very accomplished. And everybody's thanking him. Well, I got up. I said, "Well, what the hell, for anything more creative to say?" I said, "Well, I was a lousy runner, but I'd still like to thank so-and-so for his inspiration." And he liked it better than anybody. And I gave the talk, and I said, "It's amazing as a young boy, all the free advice I got as to don't lift weights. It makes you," fortunately, we don't hear it anymore, muscle bound. And I gave my whole thing. Well, at the end of the thing there, they had a reception or whatever with people there, and a man walks up to me. He said, "Bill, I don't know if you know." I said, "I know exactly who you are." He was my gym teacher. He was a football coach, and he almost had tears in his eyes. He said, "You could have been talking about me." He says, "And I am so proud of you and so happy for you." He says, "And I'm so glad to say that I learned something from you tonight that I never would have accepted back in the day," you know. And that's nice. Something I never forgot.
Yeah, that's great.
Stuck out in my head more than any
That's great.
part of that event that night, you know. So
let me try to get us on track with I love all the stories. But before we do that next question, do you think you're on an iPad right now? Is that what you're looking at?
Yes.
Do you think you could put it on a flat surface and sit in front of it? Because what I see is your face going like this the whole time. Like if you put it on a table or something like that.
Well,
or properly.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. It does not bother me. I'm just thinking about if anyone's watching this later, they might get a little dizzy because it's just.
Yeah, I could try to hold it like that if that'd be all right with you.
If that works better, whatever you could do.
As long as I don't move it around, I understand.
Yeah, and so you kind of got your thumb in front of the screen partially, right? So your thumb on top there. Do you have a book or something right now? I just have a book behind my iPad is what I have. And
yeah, let me see what I can do here.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt the flow, but I'm just... I don't want people to get dizzy here a little bit. So I'm feeling a little bit, be honest.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
going to try to hold it there.
All right. Sorry about that. We can move around whatever's comfortable for you, but that's great. So anyway, so this is how you got introduced. You had Val as your influence. When was your first weightlifting competition?
My first competition was that, I was tied up with Val, and it just wasn't a straight line. I was still in school. Then I started hanging out, the old hanging out thing, and then went in a different direction with the girls, and then I wasn't training as much. But all I did, where I would be in the backyard and everything, I obviously left a pretty good baseline for me. And then it was where I was out partying. I picked up I'm ashamed to say it, I picked up smoking and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then somebody told me, he said, I was at such and such a gym. I saw Val. Oh, man, you ought to see him. And that was a year before he won the Mr. America title. Mm. And I took a ride over to see him. And at his house, matter of fact. And he was getting dressed. And he was leaving. He was going to York, Pennsylvania. He was invited to Bob Hoffman's 65th birthday party. Mm-hmm. But I saw Val, and he was dressed in a suit, looked like a movie star leaving. And I was kind of ashamed of myself. I said, man. And I knew where he went, this little gym. Yeah. And, of course, he was the king of the gym. There was all these other young guys here. And I went in, and, when he was back and he was training, and I joined up the gym, and started training that way, and started training with Val. Anyhow, training along, and Val, he didn't have a training partner, and he asked me the one night, I'm here working out and everything. He says, you want to work out with me? That was like handing the golden shield. I said, yeah, great, man. Yeah. I started working out with him, and Val said afterwards, he said, what I like about Bill, he said, he's a glutton for punishment. He said, he'll do whatever I want him to do what I do, but of course lesser weights and everything like that. And that's basically how I got started organized. So,
how old were you then?
I'm trying to think. 18, I think I was. And Val said, you're pretty strong, because I did have that baseline. Mm-hmm. And he said, it used to kill me to watch you do squats, because I would do a good morning, if you know what a good morning is. Yeah. He said, you're coming up. Yeah. Yep. He said, you're standing up. He says, and then you're coming up with the back. Yeah. Because it was so convoluted, actually, it helped my erector muscles. But he's looking. He said, you ought to get in a contest. He says, you're pretty strong. So he entered me into a novice contest up in Philadelphia. And I went in the contest weighing 181. And it was a novice, so I won the competition. But I was anything but impressed with myself. I said, I did that. And I was still tied up with this, this girl I was dating at the time. Well, then that went south, and then it became more where I was starting to go to competitions with Val. And basically, that's how it started. It was
all right, nice.
Olympic weightlifting. And then I went into, I don't know how, I went in a couple of them, and then I went into the bodybuilding, because Val was doing bodybuilding. I went either which way. And then it started from there. It was more of a linear.
Yeah, I mean, I have a list of your competitions here. The first one we have on the list from Joe Rourke, who founded IronHistory.com, the website I own. He's has most statistics, everything. We have a list of about 30 competitions, bodybuilding competitions that you were in. The first one we have listed was on February 1964, Mr. Junior Middle Atlantic. I don't know if that was your first, but that's the first one we have listed. Does that sound right?
And it might have been something up before that wasn't registered, but yeah, it's close to where I was starting to go with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so people are used to bodybuilding competitions. Nowadays with sometimes good lighting and a show. But back then we hear stories of often being a few things like either in a gym, like underneath a basketball hoop, sometimes held a light, or usually after the Olympic weightlifting competitions, and sometimes going to like 2 or 3 in the morning. I don't know, what were your experiences that you remember at those early competitions?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. It was a you were the afterthought, I guess, of the open competition. And then I had, interesting note, I had my friends, my buddies, and they were in college and all that at the time. And they came to see me. I was in the Mr. South Jersey competition. And with that was open competition, and it was more attention paid, of course, to the Olympic lifting. Well, they came up, and they were friends of mine that played football and different things like that. Well, they walked in, and who was competing but Bill March? And Bill March was in the top of his game at that time. Mm-hmm. So now they got this, like a novice competition physique, but then they had the open, where you had some of the best weightlifters in the world, which was kind of interesting. And it was very interesting to my friends. They all come up to see me. And Bill March was the last lifter because he was lifting the most weight. So he's doing 400 pounds in the clean and jerk. And that's what these guys, they're watching this. Well, they had in the earlier stages some of these guys with the bands tied around their head and screaming and psyching themselves and everything. And March came out quiet, didn't say anything. And it was 400 pounds he was doing. And he cleaned and jerked it and then just kind of waved to the people as he walked off. Well, all the way home, that's all these guys would talk about was this guy, Bill March. Because Bill was really a great athlete. Yeah. Like Val, he could do so many other different things. And they were mesmerized. And for years, that's what they would talk about. Not me in Mr. South Jersey, but... And
according to this, you won that competition, too. Is that your first win?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember.
It says May 9th, 1964, won Mr. South Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have to guess on that, but But it's funny, you fast forward, and Bill March and I became best of friends. We were very close friends. And even, as a matter of fact, when Bill passed, his wife called me and asked if I'd come up and do the eulogy. But I wound up with a touch of this COVID at the time that Bill had died. And but I would stop and visit Bill, and because he was like Val, he was very instrumental in my experience and my development, I guess, in the weight training. Because Bill, at the time, was the primo experiment of Dr. Ziegler.
Yeah, why don't we take a minute to get to there, because we're not up to Dr. Ziegler, so we'll come back to that maybe. So I guess you then, how did you start going to York and being involved with the York gang as you did more and more competitions?
Well, Val Vasilef, to his, and my undying gratitude, to his credit, always pulled me in that I was with him. I was never an embarrassing stepchild that, was the low end of the competition, but he'd say, well, Bill's with me, and somehow pulled me into this whole experience, and I was maybe in an accelerated thing for, who I was to what I merited as far as my
You're very modest.
Well, thank you, but that's how I feel in that regard.
So when do you remember the first time you went to York, just as a spectator, or?
Yep, I sure do.
Why don't you tell us about that?
It was 1960. I'm trying to get my thoughts together on it because we got up there, and I believe, it was before Val won Mr. America, but we went to York, and he went with a writer. This guy was and they were doing a newspaper article on Val or something, but he, as far as I remember, there were three of us that went up there. And we got up and we walked in on the second floor. No, we walked in, that's right. And I keep getting my thoughts messed up here, but
It's okay.
I'm trying to think. It was, it was before Val won Mr. America. But we went up on the second floor, and I walked in, and it was John Grimek was there. And I'm saying, well, it's John Grimek, And it took over the years to where I gained a total, absolute admiration, respect, regard.
Mm-hmm.
One of my prouder things in weight training was that I became very good friends with John Grimek.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, all that I thought these people were just being too much hype and everything, I think they understated the impact of John Grimek.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, for decades, really. I mean, he was the man. So yeah.
I can't say enough about it.
Was he working out when you first went? Was it in the gym when you saw him? Kind of when you first saw him.
No, I don't know if it was the first or the second time, but because we were up on the second floor and went out on a roof, they were taking pictures of Val, so it was, kind of rudimentary, if you will.
This is Ridge Avenue, right? York.
Ridge Avenue.
Yeah.
And that's when I first met John Grimek, and a bit abbreviated the visit was, but when we came back, and then the next time was up a little over a month later that Val won the Mr. American. Val stuck his head in and he stuck his head back out. He said, Vern Weaver's here. And Vern Weaver was training. And again, Vern and I became pretty good friends. I mean, I tried to, people that meant something to the sport and that I respected, I always tried to ingratiate myself, and it, I was real happy with that success. And Weaver, of course, he had, wound up taking his own life and everything. And it was not too long before that Weaver and I spent like most of the day together talking. But again, I can't say anything bad about him. In my opinion, he was another one, great athlete. And he had this power. And I remember telling him, because at that time I was established at the time, I said, Vern, I remember reading about you. You doing a 350 power clean. I says, and I worked hard to try to do that also. And he said, well, and he would get half embarrassed. He said, well, actually, Bill, he said, I did 400. I said, you just blew me off the board, Vern.
Yeah.
But, and jumping around, but what Grimek used to say, he said, from not having all the equipment you wanted, he said, somehow it worked to your advantage. Like Val didn't have enough weights, so he started doing one-arm stuff. And he gained this, this interesting strength in different areas doing that. Vern Weaver, he didn't have a squat rack. So he would clean the weight and then hoist it over his shoulder to do squats. So how valuable
Yeah.
was the from not having equipment to how it affected him. And Grimek used to say the same thing. He says so many things that you just didn't have that. The hell with it. Let's just lift it up there, and
and even the weights you did have, you are now surrounded by some of these top lifters, but at first when you were younger, you just had pictures really, and you're trying to learn how to do Olympic weightlifting from pictures you're not gonna do it 100% right.
Well,
yeah.
the Continental clean I talked to you about, I would have never lifted 200 pounds above my head.
Yeah.
If I had to do a straight clean, because I couldn't do it at the time. Well, I didn't even know what the hell it was.
Yeah. I mean, you see a picture here, you see a picture here. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So were you when you were competing in these bodybuilding shows, were you still competing in Olympic lifting the whole time, or?
No, I kind of sloughed off on that, but I always, I remember going up to the Philadelphia Eagles, the pro football team. We were doing a halftime exhibition as an Olympic fundraising. And
who was the York guys or?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, we get a call from, at this one, it was, Val and I trained at the Philadelphia Athletic Club, and the head of the athletic club was John B. Kelly, which is Princess Grace Kelly's brother.
Okay.
So that was our little lean against celebrity, I guess.
Yes, unusual.
Well, Grace Kelly's brother, her father was a gold medal in the sculling in the rowing competition, and the father inured this on his son, and that's what he did through college, and he competed in the 48, 52, 56, and 60 Olympic Games in the single sculls in rowing.
Oh, yeah.
So consequently, he was involved. And as a matter of fact, at the time he died, he was appointed the head of the United States Olympic Committee, but never had an occasion to really wield any kind of power because he had passed away.
So his son was into athletics, and that he owned the gym.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying, so you're saying his son was into athletics, and that's how he got involved in owning the gym that you went to?
Well, he didn't own it. The athletic club was an old turn of the century, one of the oldest clubs of its kind, and it was more of a honorary position, I guess, of his prestige and being a former Olympian and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Val got up there. Well, he tapped us anytime he needed somebody for exhibitions, and we were allowed to train there. And consequently, the exposure of being up there was kind of nice. But we would do like the Philadelphia Phillies games for the Olympic fundraising, and like I said, most of the membership there was doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and we were kind of maybe a interest point, saying, well, we got a couple guys that compete in weightlifting.
Gotcha.
And they had some of the pro teams, but not as steadily or as dedicated as we were as far as, training there, like the Philadelphia Eagles, and at that time even, there was still a thing like the Phillies, the baseball player was one pitcher said, well, I'm a baseball pitcher, and like weights would totally throw his game off type attitude.
Yeah.
Why even get in the conversation about that? But this is the type of thing that was still
for
around
sure
at the time. And I'd say, well, pro football likes to take credit for bringing weight training into the mainstream, and it wasn't that at all. At the time that weight training started to become into the mainstream was, of anything, was college wrestling, then college football, and then hit and miss with the pros with football. I mean, I remember going up for a demonstration I was given with the Isotron to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I got up there and set up everything. And the guy said, well, I'm cooling my heels waiting for the trainer to come out. And the guy said, well, you want to see the weight room? Yeah, of course. You know, went in there. He said, well, what do you think? I says, it looks antiseptic. I says, it looks like a weight sales room. I said, it doesn't really have that feel to it.
Yeah.
You walk into a gym and,
dusty.
like it's used.
Yeah.
And I said, it doesn't look like it's even used, and I wasn't with open arms that's another story.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel it. Did you ever see, it reminds me of a story that Jan told me actually about John Grimek, about when they opened Ridge Avenue and they opened the gym there, and he had been so used to training at Broad Street Gym for, a couple of decades, and how he felt the same way actually about Ridge Avenue. Like it was supposed to be all modern and up to date, but it didn't have the grit, I guess, that he had initially, had at the Broad Street.
I heard Jan tell that story.
Yeah. But when you were at Ridge Avenue, you didn't feel that it had been broken in, so to speak.
Nah, it was broken in pretty good by that time.
Yeah. So when you're entering competitions, you're going with Val, you're doing these exhibitions. When did you? I know there's a story you wrote about when you first were going to. I think you met Dr. Ziegler at a picnic. Is it at the York picnic?
Yeah, and it was Val that came to me. Val at the time had won the Mr. America title, and he was doing a lot of travel and everything. And Val, and actually, I guess by necessity, certain things helped you out. And it turned out that I lost my training partner, but I trained by myself. And it worked out well because I didn't have to depend on anybody. And that's, I got involved in that. But anyhow, Val shows up one time. He said, there's this doctor. He says, and can make muscle grow electronically or something, and that piqued my interest,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of interested. And then I would start hearing stories about Dr. Ziegler. And, I'm saying, wow, I was kind of fascinated a little bit with the guy. But from the stories that I heard, then I'd read anything I'd see in the Strength and Health magazine. I'd be reading about it. And then Val calls me. He was going with a girl down in Baltimore at the time. And he calls me on a Sunday morning. He said, Bill, I'm going to Dr. Ziegler's today. And he was asked to go there, or was invited to go there, or whatever, by the doctor. He says, if you want to go down, I said, yeah, man. So I jump in the car, I'm in the turnpike, and I get down to Baltimore, and I meet Val. And then from there, we get down to Albany, Maryland, which is a hell of a good distance from Baltimore.
So you met him at Baltimore first? I just was trying to remember your article. I thought you met... Okay.
No, I'm telling that story, but
Okay.
where I met him, I was at the... now I'm hearing everything about him. Now I'm kind of fascinated because there's people I respected are having this regard for him, like Bill March and people like that. So anyhow, I'm at the York picnic, and now I'm trying to think. There was a number of things happened that day.
Okay.
Because that was Hoffman's baby, that picnic.
Yeah.
So now we're there the night before, and I forget what the thing was with Val, but now there was no place to stay, and the Val's with this girl. He said, well, Bill, he said, I'm going back down to Baltimore. And there was no cell phones or anything at the time. He said, but here's so-and-so's phone number. He said, if anything comes up where you got to get a hold of me. And he said, but, I said, there's no place that I could, I can't get a room, and, everything's crowded. And off he goes. So now I learned to realize how important this picnic was to Bob Hoffman. So
Yeah, for those who don't know, Bob Hoffman would throw a picnic at the York picnic like every year, and just people in the industry would get together. There'd usually be some exhibitions of weightlifting and bodybuilding. He'd have his supplements there, and it was kind of a get together of history. I know with like people like Sorenex and Summer Strong that people may be familiar with now. It's trying to recreate that, and Richard Soren used to go to these picnics, so it's a kind of just a before there were fitness conventions and everything. This was a yearly get together of people in the industry. Anyway, yeah.
It was like Labor Day weekend, and then just for the general populace, that a lot of people would, work their holiday around making the trip to York. I mean, at the time, and these people were seeing John Grimek, and he had star power. He really did. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, when I'm up there, and now I'm just by myself, I believe I slept in the car. It was no problem. But, none of that stuff bothered you. Mm-hmm. And, now, Val was the current Mr. America. He's getting ready to go to London for the Mr. Universe. So that was a little nugget that Bob Hoffman wanted at the picnic. Well, I see Bob early. And I said, well, Val didn't have any, Hoffman, he was really not happy with that news. He said, well.
Happy with what news?
With Val not being there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He was going to be there. Because Val would play the star role to the max also, with the girl in the car and all this kind of stuff. And he had a feel for that. But anyhow, Hoffman was raising hell about it. So now this kind of gave me an idea of things, So I said, listen, Bob, I said, because now Bob's, he's borderline yelling at me. Mm-hmm. I said, Bob, can you get me to a phone? I said, I want to call Val. Yeah, all right. We're walking through these stickers and through the weeds, and we're looking at this park. I said, do you rent this? He said, no, I bought this, And this is impressive me, some poor kid from Jersey. I said, do you use it? No, he said, just for the picnic. That's all. And it was an old amusement park is what it was. Wow. So now we're walking across the street, and I'm saying, well, we'll use this house here. I said, well, you know these people? I own this house. Uh-huh. I said, you own this one? He said, well, I own all these houses all along the street there. Yeah. But he's just talking. Yeah. But he's banging on the door. Oh, Bob, how you doing? This lady, we need to use the phone. Yeah, come on in. And now this is leaving an impression on me. Yeah. I dialed the number. I said, Val's on the phone. I said, Val, listen, I'm here with Bob Hoffman. I said, he wants to talk to you. I said, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's why I had you looking out for me, Billy, on that, And Bob grabs the phone. Val, he says, I think you ought to get up here. He said, we got this, whatever conversation it was. And he hands the phone back. Uh-huh. I said, just get up here as soon as you can. I said, Bob's not a happy camper. So that was that part of it. So now the picnic, it's time going on. Val's driving up. And I think I don't know if it was a year, because I went up there every year after that, but Val gets up there. So he pulls in. Now it's like all these people. And Val, at the time, he was real current in the magazines and everything. He gets out, and he's playing this thing up. He's with this very pretty girl. He's got this lavender, I don't know where the hell he got the color, but this lavender Grand Prix driving, and it all had a good visual, I guess. Yeah. So now, he's there. So I come over to Val, and we're talking, and people coming in and different things happening. Well, I'm there with Val, and I see this commotion going on. Now, these two pretty girls in this Morgan sports car. It turns out it's Dr. Ziegler's daughter and John Grimek's daughter. And that's a story on its own of how they were acquainted. But anyhow, they come in this sports car. You got Val over there holding court with a bunch of people, and I'm saying, well, this is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And now with Val, now this other commotion's going on. This car pulls in. This guy gets out. He looks like John Wayne, cowboy hat, and the whole 9 yards. And I said, "Oh, who the hell was that?" And he said, and he's looking. "Oh, that's Dr. Ziegler." I said, "Wow." I said,
"Not we expected."
That's a neat first impression.
Yeah.
So he got this crowd around him with that. So the course of the day with whatever was going on, it's lost to memory now. But now the picnic's over, but we're going to they're going to Hoffman's house. Well, of course, Val's invited, and Val brings me along. So I'm part of the thing. Well, we get there. So now Hoffman's got this big house that he's got, and he's got different rooms with different things going on. Now he's got Perry Rader and Mabel Rader and these people in the one room, mm-hmm. somebody else in another room, and then Val's sitting on this bench or whatever. But he swirls around and he lifts the thing up where there's it's a piano. Well, Val starts playing the piano. He's playing some classical. I didn't know he could do that, but I guess it's something his mother taught him from the old country. And Bob Hoffman goes off on that. See, we picked the right man for Mr. America. Look, he could do everything, could do anything, and he's playing this piano going on. It's like surreal what's going on. I said, well, this is kind of different, and he's doing that. And then spins back around and he's talking to somebody. It's like, that was like nothing.
Yeah.
And then in the other room, and I guess, with Dr. Ziegler, and he's kind of poking holes in the, what he might consider being a little, showing off or whatever. I don't know. But he's in there drinking. He's brought a bottle with him. He's drinking whiskey. And
okay.
Now he's got Val's girlfriend sitting on his lap, and they're carrying on. And, because he was a character. And now I'm sitting there, and I'm looking. I say, "Here's a man I just read a bunch of stuff about and everything. He don't know who that guy am, but he starts talking, and he's talking far out stuff. And I said, well, but after a while now he's making sense to me. I'm like, this guy's a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
And talking about anything, everything, and I spent most of my time in there because you can go in different rooms and get a different experience, I guess. I'm guessing
like the Perry and Mabel Rader room was a little bit different. They're just
it was almost a date. Beautiful people, wonderful, and like I said, a different experience.
Yeah.
But anyhow, it's like I said, well, it's getting late, and of course, I never wanted to be where I'm just hanging the last minute. I went over. I said, Bob, I'm getting ready to leave now. I'll walk you out. I said, no, I want to walk you out. I think he felt a little bad for
earlier
berating and hollering, at me. Uh-huh. And we're walking out in the driveway, and he insists on me getting some money. He says, you need your money. And I said, no. So he gave me some money for gas or whatever. I don't know what the heck it was, but he's been very nice to me. And I said, that Dr. Ziegler, I said, he's really kind of different. I said, interesting. I said, I understand, Bob. He's got a machine that Hoffman went off on a tangent on that. He said, Bill, it's unbelievable. He said, I come off of that thing, he said, and Alda, which was his common-law wife, he said, Alda said, you look like John Grimek after coming off of that machine. He was real proud of that. Uh-huh. But he's touting about, he went off on a little bit of a tangent about how great he thought this machine was. And off I went home. So now, I don't know how much forward in time it would be, but I get this phone call on a Sunday morning. It was a gray Sunday morning early in the spring, real early, I guess. He said, Bill, I'm going to Dr. Ziegler's if you want to come down there. Yeah, like I told you, down I go and meet Val. So now we get down to Ziegler's. And instead of like a bespectacled physician that's, again, sedate and all that, we get down here and I'm like a maelstrom of activity going on. Get down there. Now there's a bunch of people. We go back into the office, and we got this gigantic machine spitting out L-lysine tablets. That's a story in itself.
Yeah, I read that. I know what L-lysine is. Why was there a machine spitting them out?
The thing is, he's the most interesting man that I met. And, I'll be a protector of him and his image, but he never ceased to fascinate me with his variations of who he was and what he was. So anyhow, all this activity going on, and he's talking, there's a bunch of people and everything, and I said, well, I kind of come down to see this machine, but, how do you politely? Yeah. I said, well, I went all this way. I says, I understand you got this machine. I said, I wonder if I can get on it. I go, well, that's pretty, out there. But he said, hold on. He yells in that this guy, Andy, was one of the assistants, and he said, wanted to know if he had any electrolytic solution. He says, I'll check. And he looks at me. He said, we don't have any. Then, and he was just cutting it off. He says, no. Oh, I found some. So this guy preps the pads and puts the solution on there and everything, and goes in and gives me a pair of gym shorts. I put the gym shorts. I jump on this thing. Now I lay down. He puts it on my thigh.
Are people watching? Is this like? Is it people?
I think Val was in there. And I don't think it was a crowd.
Okay. Had Val done this before?
I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I don't know. But Val wound up getting another, they had this relaxerciser machine out at the time. When he figured you just get a machine and you're home free, I guess. And Val was... He'd go in their offices, tell them who he was and everything. And they gave him a demonstration. It turned out as a relaxerciser. It was nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the relaxerciser.
No, well, it won't go on the story itself on that. But he puts this thing on my thigh. He turns it up, turns it off, and then goes back into whatever the hell else he was doing and entertaining and talking and we leave.
Well, what happened when he turned it on?
He gave me a contraction on my quadricep.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things, and first thing comes to my mind is sometime you read about, you hear about, you talk about all the hype, and then the reality is a letdown. And that was what wouldn't have surprised me. And not that I was waiting for it or anything, but I'm saying all this hype and everything. And it wasn't until we're in the car and we're going back and Val asked me, he said, well, what'd you think of that machine, Bill? And I told him just what I just said to you. I said, you ever see anything and it's just done it? I said, that thing is like 10 times more than what I expected. I said, it blew my mind, Val. Incredible.
Just because of how much the contraction was, and you felt from just a little bit of work or a little bit of...
I can explain it as good as anybody because I've been around it as good as anybody. And the thing is that anything you do in sports, of course, or anything you do in life, anything physical other than thought, you're using muscle. using muscle to ingest nutrients, ingest, waste and, everything about we're in a physical world.
Mm-hmm.
And with this machine, the apex of muscle contraction, in my opinion, was weightlifting. Because if you contract the muscles doing a curl with 50 pounds, it's going to be a more intense contraction if you put another 50 pounds on it or 100 pounds. So you have this contraction that you're working with. And the most intense contraction is experienced by weightlifters, by weight trainers. And I don't know if Ziegler thought that because, he was friends with John Grimek from back in the late 40s when he came back from the service. And
really, I didn't know that. Okay.
But the Isotron wasn't born out of muscle strength and athletics and sport. Dr. Ziegler's father was he was a fourth generation doctor, and his father was a physician, worked with public health service, and he gave him a rudimentary dry cell battery machine from the turn of the last century. And at that time, there was a lot of post-polio mellitus damage out there with therapy trying to help these people, even though they saw come out with the cure for polio.
Well, even before that, like in late 1800s, and there was a lot of stuff with electricity. They were trying to figure out what electricity would do, and there were a lot of devices, electricity, and it was a whole. Right. If there was any medicine to that, I'm not sure, but it was definitely part of what they were selling to people at the time. There was even dumbbells that had electricity going through you, and then there was exhibitions.
Every kind of variation you can imagine that they had. And what Ziegler had with this thing, since Galvani invented the battery, they've been jumping frogs' legs in, biology dissection classes in high schools across the country, the world, whatever you had. So you had these. And Ziegler was given one by his dad. And at the time, a lot of his patients were post-polio damaged patients. And he was intrigued with the concept of people that couldn't go through an anatomical motion and being able to work the muscle, but was disappointed with anything that was out there and started fooling around with ideas. And then, we fast forward, he come all the way up with the Isotron, where what he developed in concert with this electrolytic solution was a signal output that was conducive to the human body. And like Ziegler would explain it, you want your muscle to move, unscrew a light bulb and stick your finger in there. But it doesn't mean that it's physiological, that it's useful contraction that you're getting. And he would, again, talk, because he had a heck of a sense of humor, he would say, they had, back when Edison came out with the electric chair and they're executing criminals, that they'd have just little leather straps, and with some of these big burly condemned prisoners, that when they shot this electricity through the body, it would actually break these leather restraints. And Ziegler, with a crowd of people, holding court, he'd be telling them, very impressive, but when the smoke cleared, the poor bastard's sitting there dead. He says, so it really wasn't a good functional contraction.
Yeah.
So what he found that he could do is to have this and have useful contractions, and started getting, good therapy and good results with polio patients. Curious mind that he had, that he found that even turning up the output on the machine, that the person didn't balk at the electricity, because more times than not, it'd be now before they have a contraction that would, really take you back. You couldn't take the discomfort of electricity coursing your body. And that was accomplished, like I said, with the solution and the signal output.
He was Dr. Ziegler. What was his? What type of physician? So after the World War II, he became a physician, and then he went into a rehabilitative medicine kind of at the time, which was probably new at the time.
He graduated Gettysburg College, was going to go into med school when the war broke out. He joined the Marine Corps in the South Pacific, and his wounds were so bad that he was a low priority evacuee. They were getting the people that they could save, and they actually, his regard in that was that they didn't think he was going to make it.
Was he shot or shrapnel or?
Oh yeah, everything. He was shot. He was stabbed with a bayonet and all that kind of, just. Where
was he stationed? When he was in...
This was in Iwo Jima.
Oh wow! Mm-hmm.
And that was where it was hell on earth in a place like that. So he came back, and he was a family traditionalist. They advised him against going into med school, that his wounds were so severe that it, and not to be. He went into med school because he confided to me stories I got out of him. It wasn't a litany of the first day I met him, he told me all this.
Yeah.
Over a period of years, when he felt like talking about something, and we were on a long drive or a long flight going somewhere, that once in a while he would talk, but I couldn't say, well, today, how about if we talk about it? Didn't work that way. It had to be on his terms totally. And like I said, over the years, and because it was of interest to me, I retained a hell of a lot of what he was talking about.
Well, please tell us what seems interesting to you, so that we can have it, on record, so we know more about him.
Well, he, when he came back and he went in, he said, Bill, he wanted to be a neurosurgeon, he wanted to be a brain surgeon, and he had the smarts, but he said he lost the sight in one eye, and depth perception is everything to a surgeon. And he had to put that aside. So, again, with all that, with his own rehab, and he got into interest in resistance training, and York wasn't that far for him to go. Mm-hmm. And he became very good friends with John Grimek, Steve Stanko, Dick Bechtel, and the common interest they might have had between the training, and I know Dick Bechtel with gun collection and things like that. And he started going up there, which set the tone for a lot of things that happened in the future. But that was the story as far as the beginning of the Isotron. It's like, I'm going to build a machine that's going to make people stronger. It was none of that. And it was totally experimental, voluntarily, to people like Bill March. And, I know I jump around a lot, but I piece it together like a long drive. Bill March.
We're getting there. So he was using for rehab though first before he started, but he was a weightlifter because he knew John Grimek. So he was a weightlifter. Then he was rehabbing these people. Then his father gave him a primitive version of the machine. So he started kind of experimenting with rehab first on using it on venting a machine, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that was it. And he, when he really got interested in using the machine, like when he came out with the isometric experiments that he wanted to do. And what's kind of cool for me is that I got to know not that I met these people when I talked. I got to know them. I got to be very good friends with, like, Bill March was his prime example on that with the Isometrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave a little bit of a talk when Bill was inducted into, well, I don't know if he was recognized at the Old Timers thing up in Newark.
Yeah,
right up
yeah.
New York.
Yeah, I saw a picture that you've been there. We might have even been there at the same time. I've been to, I don't know, half a dozen of them before.
Well,
yeah.
I am angry with myself that I only went to one. And I should have went to every one.
Yeah, you're right. You were right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I went there, because what had happened, Bill got, again, like Ziegler, he got maligned and got misquoted and different things over the years. So he just disconnected. And the only people he would see basically would be me. Like I can go up there, and then Bill Starr wanted to go up. So Bill and I went to, Bill March's house together. And
so Bill March didn't he kind of separated himself because he didn't like the things that he was being quoted as, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, and if you go online, you could, like, the Baltimore Sun, the Pittsburgh Gazette, different things, where the people interviewing him didn't know about Jack on weight training or anything. And they go in there, and either Bill would get misquoted what he thought, and he'd read the end product and say, well, I don't want to avail myself to this anymore. And just kind of disconnected. So it came time, and then Jan Dellinger told me, he said they want to recognize Bill, going up. I said, yeah, if you go. I said, I'll go up there. And I called Bill on the phone. I said, Bill, he said, no, I don't want to do it. And he says, he just wasn't interested. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if you're there, I'm there. I said, but if you're not going, I said, all right, then, And Jan called me,
mm-hmm.
and he said, Bill, I don't know if you know, Bill March is going to go to that thing. I said, no, I didn't know. I said, I'll call him. Which I did. And he said, well, my daughter and my wife think that I ought to go up. I said, I think you ought to, too. I didn't want to talk you one way or the other. I said, but I'm going to be there. Well, you don't have to go. Yes, I do. I'll be there. So we went up, and again, I think with the brevity of March and the humility of March, that he wasn't going to say all that I thought that should be said. And I got up. I don't know if Jan thought maybe I was out of play, but I said, the hell with it. I said that I got to say these things. So I got up and I said, Bill took this thing on, because Bill got up to talk about isometrics and the work he was doing with Dr. Ziegler. He said, and the long drive that he and I had one time down into Virginia, and Bill told me the whole story. He was some kid that Vern Weaver touted to the powers that be up there at York, as far as weightlifting and everything. He said, and he was training, and they wanted to experiment. And I could go jump between Ziegler and March.
Yeah, well, let's continue with March since we're in the middle of it. So, and then we'll go back a little. Yeah.
March was up there and got up to talk. He said that they asked him if he would work with this doctor in Maryland. He thinks he can make him stronger. Bill committed himself to it. Smitty was an integral part because Bill just got married. He wasn't going to stay down there at Ziegler's like I did. Of course, I camped down there for years. On weekends, I get down there. And Smitty would take him down, bring him back, and Smitty was really engaged in this whole experiment.
This was before you were involved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the first time he had a competitive weightlifter. So he went there and he laid the thing out that he wanted him to do, and this is what he announced up there in New York. He said that I was doing it, and when I first started doing it, I didn't like it. I didn't believe in it. And that's where I got up to talk afterwards. He said, Bill committed himself to doing exactly, he said, no deviation, do exactly what we're asked to do. And most guys that took on that thing snuck in workouts, and it negated any result they were
We're talking about the isometrics. So we're talking.
Now, yeah, the isometrics. So March said I didn't like it, didn't want to do it, but I did it because I gave my word. He said, but then the first month he put 30 pounds on his total. He said, well, that kind of got my attention. Mm-hmm. He said, let's continue on with it, and that's how it started. When I got up to talk, I said, if it wasn't for Bill, I said, either being a knothead or being conscientious and following to the letter, this whole thing would have fell apart. I said, but he had the success that he hoped for and expected, that Dr. Ziegler expected. And he had the perfect guinea pig in Bill March.
Would you think that was some isometrics were something he was doing with his rehabilitative patients, and that's why he kind of went over to trying that? Or was he just experimenting different ways with building muscle?
There was these doctors in Germany back in the 19-teens, 1917 or whatever. But they had these frogs, and they would have to hang the frogs where they'd extend their limbs, and hang the frogs and tie them where the frog's natural inclination is to try to bring it back into a get set, ready, jump type thing. Mm-hmm. And here they kept pulling, and they found that they were making the frogs jump further because the muscles were getting stronger from pulling it. Hence, the isometrics started. Okay. And Ziegler took it to a different, another degree in using human beings and everything, and started getting these really interesting results from doing it. And Bill, being the consummate guinea pig, and that's why I made it for a funny part, but they said, well, Ziegler said that the work he did with March and St. John, that those two guys took 10 times as much as a human being, so I knew I had a safety factor with dealing with regular patients. Mm. And that was it. And March
took 10 times as much what? Workload or
10 times as much on the I'm getting away from it on the Isotron.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because they had NASA come by one time and they were checking stress in a weightless condition. I was the guinea pig, and they had me all wired for sound between temperature variations in the blood and how much contraction. And then they took this thing and they placed it directly over my heart, which any sensible person would balk at doing that when they placed a pad directly over my heart. And he turned the Isotron through an amplifier up higher to where, of course, it engaged the pectoral major, minor, and then going up into the externocleidomastoid and the trapezoid, and everything was in total distension, massive contraction. And on the EKG, it was going ba-boom, 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 and there was a doctor there saying, I'm witnessing this and I'm still finding it hard to accept what I'm saying.
So that it was contracting everything, but it wasn't affecting your heart. Is that what you're saying?
It wasn't affecting anything in the cardiac.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, I was motivated to do it anyhow for that reason, the people that were there and all that stuff. But, and Bill March and I would compare notes.
So before that, Bill March was doing the isometrics, and at some point he introduced the Isotron into that as well. And then when did you start doing, getting involved in that?
Well, it was after the thing that Bill March did, And the time that Val got, invited me, I, went along with him. But March and I took a extremely long drive to this place in Virginia where he was competing, and he told me, kind of everything that he knew about it, and the work that he did with it. And March believed in it. And they asked him that question up in New York. They said, "Do you feel that you made any progress? That you did any good with the Isotron?" He said, "I never did anything on any of the things that were laid out for me with Dr. Ziegler that I didn't progress." So March believed in it. And there were some that couldn't accept the intensity of it. March thrived on it, I thrived on it, but there was a lot of people that just could not take the intensity. They said, well, it was just too much, because it was as much as you could take. It's how much that machine could put out.
So I know it's probably a harder protocol to explain easily, but if you can, would it be that he would take you through a workout per body part? Would you do a full workout? Would it be is there a set, so you would do it maybe 5 times, or would it just be one hard contraction over here, one hard contraction over here? Maybe just in a general sense, how did that work out as far as working your body?
Where it was applicable to the rehab work that he did, and it could actually work on the same score, as you could do a different modality for for training. But to take and basically starting out was an unknown. It's let's turn this bad boy up and let's see what the heck happens. And it took a knothead like me in March to go on and say, well, crank it up. Let's go there. Let's do it.
And from March was a competing weightlifter, but you say you were a bodybuilder. Were you tracking progress from a body and still building standpoint, or from your weight going up standpoint?
Well, again, Jared, it was all, let's see what happens.
Wait, what happened?
It's never been done.
Yeah.
And I feel the experience and the just general knowledge gained with that thing. I was proud of it for some kid that, I guess his mother growing up said, well, I think with Bill, a mind isn't such a bad thing to waste. She thought that, and she was kind of happy, but I proved to myself, if there's certain things that interest you, then you can absorb certain knowledge. My oldest sister got every kind of scholarship you can think of, going through college and and everything like that. And I was on the lower end of the evolutionary intellectual scale when it came to, in a funny way, when it came to that. But when I was working with the doctor, because it was of interest to me, and he saw that and was willing to explain and take the time, and and it was a good trade-off. I mean, anything he needed done at any place he wanted me to be, I was his guy. How long were
you guys working together for?
Well, I started going down there in 1967. Was the first time I went to Dr. Ziegler's, and all the way up till he died in 1983.
And when did so sometime when he started with Bill March, when did Hoffman start seeing these results and wanting to start marketing it and putting his magazines, the newest thing, and selling a little, the board that you pull off the chain and all that stuff?
I think, Hoffman liked the bling of a doctor being involved with York Barbell and what they were doing. And not to say, Ziegler wouldn't compromise himself. He was a physician, number one, and he kept that integrity. It was important to him. Mm-hmm. And there were other physicians that came by there, like Dr. John Gurgat. He was trained as an ophthalmologist and did his residency at Johns Hopkins, and he would come from Baltimore down there to get treatments on the Isotron. And that's, I can go on, but I mean, that's a story in itself. But Gurgat and I became real good friends, and Gurgat was second place when Val won Mr. America. Gurgat placed at that same year just behind Bill March in the Nationals in the Olympic 198-pound class. And he was another absolutely brilliant mind, a character, of course, but, he was, and he talked me into flying out to San Francisco in a lot later years with the Isotron. And he said something when he got off. He says, I look at this thing not as an athlete now. I look at it as a physician and what potential this thing has. So it was kind of interesting in seeing that.
So over that decade or so, when you were working with the Isotron, what, and like you said, at first you were just, Dr. Ziegler was just experimenting and trying to figure things out. What did he figure out? Did it become more methodic of what you knew worked and how it worked?
Well, it just an anecdotal thing that was interesting to me. I mean, Hoffman used to, I mean, it's just a one-shot deal, but he pranced Val Vasilef up and down the hallways in the hotel in Chicago when Val won Mr. America, showing off to Norbert Szymanski. He said, I've never felt muscles hard as Val Vasilef. Bob Hoffman said that, and he was right. It was like a rock. And so much satisfaction was gained by me in taking treatments on the Isotron. As Ziegler told a group of people, he says, I'll blindfold you and cover Bill St. John's thigh and that oak desk cloth so you can't tell epidermis. He said, but I would defy you to tell which is which. And I told Val, I said, Val, I always was in awe over how hard your muscles were.
Wow. I
said, but every single one of my muscles is as hard as your tricep was, which was and forearm. And I thought that was interesting. I was in California, and this Dan Cantor, he was a national champion, I forget what weight class. But he said, I've been reading, he said, the work you're doing with Doc Ziegler, he said, blah, blah. And we're just talking generally. I said, and another thing, and I just told that story. And I said, even voluntarily, I said, here, feel the tricep. Oh, I don't believe it. Now he's marching me up and down the hall. He said, you can't believe the hardness of the muscle. And I guess the harder you contract, but that was it.
Interesting.
Like I say, interesting anecdotal thing. But
so what? I know he helped train you. I'm just looking at your thing, little notes over here. I guess the closest you got third in Mr. America in 1971. So did Dr. Ziegler, what was your training like leading up to that and the Isotron, and how do you feel that helped that?
Good question. What happened is before the competition was held in York, and before the competition, I remember the guy who at the gym.
Sorry, my dog's going to start barking because someone's coming home. No. Sorry about that.
No problem. But the guy who ran the gym, he told somebody, he said, I saw Bill, he says, he just doesn't seem to have that edge. I went down to Ziegler's for 14 days, come back, and he said, Bill, you look like a totally different. He says, I can't believe the difference from when you left here to when you came back from whatever the heck you're doing down here. And that was it, It was some of the best shape was between 68 and 72. I was in the finals every year. And it's like I explained, I don't know, it was John Grimek or whatever. I said, it was so good some years you could have picked any one of 8 guys at least and placed them any which way, and nobody had any kind of complaint about it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and when I went in, I never begrudged who won, but there would have been a big problem if somebody had a problem with me winning if I won, because I felt I was
right up there.
Right there.
Yeah.
I was right there with it. But for saying that, you're going to smash your trophy and they screwed me over, or I didn't win, I never felt that way. And if you only feel that there's one place for you in the competition, then pick another sport, because it's subjective.
Yeah.
And my mother thinks that I'm built better than the guy that came in first. But that's how that goes.
Yeah. So you feel the Isotron helped, and what about your diet? Did you change your diet in those times, or?
Oh yeah.
Did Ziegler have anything to do with laying out your whole workout plan, or was it in diet, or was it just the Isotron?
He was pretty integral in the things that we did there, and I was listening to him, and I felt he had valuable knowledge, advice, input, and everything else, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that part of my life, and I go with great anguish when I read falsehoods about Dr. Ziegler.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little. So, Dr. Ziegler, all anyone really talks about, which is what we're trying to rectify here, is dianabol, right? And they've got, even, not that he introduced it, that would have been cat out of the bag anyway, but so much so that it becomes hard to tell what was working, right? Because we got the Isometrics, we got dianabol, and we got the Isotron possibly going. And was it, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Was it, like, you think of the scientific method, if he's trying to figure it out, you won't have so many variables. Was there some type of regulation of doing things at different times, or are we just doing everything, or how do you try to figure that? Like, what was his thoughts on that?
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And Ziegler, at the time, started getting more involved in the organizational end of Olympic weightlifting, and he was in Vienna in 1954 at the World Championships. And again, him telling me on his own time, and it took a while for him to broach that subject, but he said that when he was there, he saw these lifters, Russian lifters, inordinately strong. And being an observant person that he was, but he watched these guys where they actually had to have a catheter up their penis to pass urine.
Crazy.
Which got him curious. And he went out and had some drinks or whatever with the Russian team doctor. And here he was told that they were giving them straight testosterone. He said, Bill St. John, he said, testosterone is not a drug, it's a hormone. Now, they're giving them the testosterone, it's having an effect on their strength, but it's also having accelerating properties to it, from enlarged prostate that's blocking urine passage, and things that he was observing.
Yeah.
Came back from Vienna, and a curious mind, he said, well, if you take out the androgenic undesired effects of testosterone and keeping the binders in for the properties he wanted for gaining strength, and that's how he got to experiment with it. And it had no stigma at that time.
Yeah, why would it? I mean, it was just another medical thing, yeah.
And if you go all the way back to ancient Greece, they would take the gonads of bulls, supposedly, as it is with the athletes, were basically looking for the strength of a bull for competition. Who knows? But Ziegler came back with that, and with Ciba Pharmaceutical, based in New Jersey at the time, and Ziegler told me, what he told me is, all I could tell you, that's the part that I would be really lame on, but he said that they had the lab and the things he said I didn't have the money for or anything like that. But they were working towards those ends and seeing what effects he could do, and they came out with dianabol. And a big property of dianabol that Ciba Pharmaceutical was very happy with was post-burn patients, where they're passing off so much plasma and it would diminish them, and some of them would die. That the anabolic, now this is, like I said, beyond my knowledge or anything on that, but it was saving lives as to where they were able to sustain a certain proteins and different things like that. And that's where that went. But then when Ziegler, and I'm talking to right from the horse's mouth, Ziegler, when March was called into the office to go down to, down to Washington, the established lifters didn't want to have anything to do. Grimek gave sage advice to Dr. Ziegler, saying you're not going to get guys that are winning national championships to go into some experimental proposition with your isometrics and different things like that. So that's when they got March, they called him up, and this is right from Bill. They said, we have a doctor that can make you stronger, Would you be interested in working with him? And March told me, he said, I'd be interested in eating horse manure if it's going to make me stronger. And that's basically how that started. And when March went down there, he prescribed 2 5-milligram tablets of dianabol a day, and other things that he laid out on the experiment that he was doing between the isometrics, doing no weight training during the week, just total the Olympic lifts on Saturdays at the York gym. And that was it.
So 2 isometrics a week, and then he would practice Olympic lifts for totals.
He was doing the isometrics. He would do the isometrics, and he was doing that 3 times, 4 times a week, whatever it was laid out, total on a Saturday, and taking this dianabol. So now he's doing all this, and he's doing all this in concert with the program that's laid out. And, that's all he did. And March, in later years, reflecting that maybe he did something that was underhanded or whatever. And then talking to some of these guys and what they were taking, what they wound up taking, and what these... you read the obituaries on these guys that are killing themselves.
Yeah.
The abuse of it. And Dr. Ziegler was anything but anything, and, with abusive or... I get it.
I hear what you're saying. You're saying that it wasn't take these magic pills and I don't care about your health. It was a scientific trying to really watch how his health is and how he's changing, and doing it really experimentally, and the dosages were probably way lower than, it's not even close to what people are doing today. But still, so he kind of came, it sounds like he maybe didn't have them separate. It was kind of part of just the program that he was trying to figure out of what worked there. Does Bill or yourself feel that the isometrics and the Isotron were very valuable on themselves too, and not the dianabol that was doing it?
Yes.
Or that's kind of what I've got from articles. That's kind of, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I feel I've heard people say and read.
No, absolutely. Because what happened years later, it was in 1983, I believe, an article came out in Sports Illustrated, written by Terry Todd, and him putting the premise out there that Isometrics was nothing, and it was all a smokescreen, and the real underlying reason why these guys had such great gains was from the drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a disservice to the work that was done. And you had, and I wound up, it was printed somewhere, but I said that to say that the real underlying reason, and it wasn't with the isometrics, is one of the most viable and profound adjuncts to gaining strength, is now pushed aside because no, that was all just phony. Like, they're going to go through all that, making these racks and put the training protocols they're putting out there, and it was all bogus, is such, it's outrageous to me. And, the guy who wrote that article did such a disservice just to, I don't know what, how ingratiated he felt that he was doing anything there, but, it was outrageous.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, I don't know, I mean, that's probably what he thought, but at the same time, I see what you're saying, this was 40, 50 years ago, and not a lot. Yeah, you can find some stuff on the internet, but there's not a lot of information about isometrics, and what you find is usually from back then. So you can imagine if people had maybe not thought that it could have developed more over the decades, and not be pushed aside. I mean, there are some people that still talk about its benefits, but it's definitely a very small niche. You have to kind of look for it.
Yeah, it's something that was something that was enlightening. It was something that was effectual, and it was pushed aside by people, I think, that wanted to glib, sound like they were in the know, and that they have the answer. They have, and that's. We come all these years and saying, well, they're accepting the weight training, and a lot of places it goes away, and for whatever reason, I don't know. And I would talk to people that were highly philosophical about it, like Dr. Grugat, and saying, well, that's what you get, and it goes in cycles. And when something came out that was effectual, and it was different, and like I said, pushed aside. So.
Yeah, did you hold on, let me get my dogs in. My family's home, so all these dogs are going to go out here. I have 3 dachshunds. Did you continue to use isometrics just in your own personal training over years?
I can't say I used it like Bill March, like with the with Olympic lifting or anything, but in defense of what I did do, I was always of the thing: if you look strong, is to be strong. Even when I wasn't doing strength competition,
and what about the Isotron? I know that so. You continued to use it throughout the 70s with Dr. Ziegler, and you went and did a lot of demonstrations, and I think he taught you, and I also believe Smitty, Dick Smith, also, like, the two of you were kind of trained on how to use it. Is that correct? Or you just kind of picked it up along the way, or?
Yes, and the thing is that I worked with the doctor on the therapeutic and rehab propositions of that machine, and it was a couple of years before he even trusted me to sit down and start administering the treatments on it. He took that very serious. It wasn't like I would have it and somebody say, "Oh, go ahead, crank it." I said, no, don't even go there. and I'm still that same pain in the neck when it comes to using it as a toy or a terrorist instrument to show somebody what it can do. I know what it can do.
Mm-hmm.
I saw, on the therapeutic end, and matter of fact, I went to a doctor just to get some paperwork filled out, and he heard that I had this machine. He became very interested in this thing. Now, I would like to see, Jarrett, before I pass from this earth, somebody do something with it rather than this being a oddity at a yard sale.
Yeah, so you still own the Isotron?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and so you've been using it, like, what have you used it on occasion over the past decades?
Well,
or what's you been doing with it?
Really close to home is that that's how I met my wife. Is that my wife, and she's, generous with her, opinion, people's knowledge on it. She has MS, and she fights it mightily as to where she goes to the gym every day and does what she can do, and she does real good. But a mutual friend, told her she had her hands were bothering her real bad. I got a friend that he's got this machine. I mean, and you put it on paper and you say, all right, take this guy and put him in a funny form. But that's how I met my wife, and it was effectual with her. And all of what the information I have at this point on is just anecdotal. I have a niece that was taken as far as she could go with a foot with a podiatrist, and her brother told her, why don't you go to Uncle Bill, see if he could do anything. He'd be upset if you didn't at least call him and talk to him about it. Mm-hmm. She came over, and whatever full function she got, how she got it, I don't know. For me to be grandiose or anything would be stupid of me. But I said, well, let's, like Ziegler told me the time, the travails that I've had or people have had, let's see what happens. And he never made any kind of outrageous claims on any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I get people, friends. There was a good friend of mine, just passed away not too long ago. He's an artist, an accomplished artist, and a good person, a good guy. And he called me, and he was familiar with the machine, but he called me. He said, Bill, can I come over? He said, my back is blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, kid. He said, well, unless you're busy, real laid-back guy. I said, is your back hurting now? Get the hell over here now. And I put him on there. And the reason that incident sticks in my head, he got off and he said, Bill, I come over and I just kind of knew it wasn't going to help. He said, because I didn't want to bother you. I went to a chiropractor, went to a doctor, went to a massage therapist. He says, and I knew it wasn't going to do anything. He said, the only help I got on this thing was that machine. He said, I got off of there, it was better. And why? I don't want to get, but all things that Dr. Quirgott said, he said, you got certain things that happen that's worthy of further study, research, or whatever. But Dr. Ziegler taught me well was not to get full of myself with that machine and think I can do the only thing I've witnessed with myself on that, Jared, is I never hurt anybody.
With Dr. Ziegler, did he ever have any written protocols? Like, did he ever write down how to use it? I know you taught you. Did you ever write anything down on how to? I know there's also there's the muscle building properties, and there's, I guess, different settings for the therapeutic healing properties also.
You're laying a guilt thing on me.
It's not I'm just wondering.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And and it should be put down, and I wrote things down, and and I'd like to see a doctor that would be interested in it, but a lot of them, they push it aside, and I do not push this machine like, you got to, none of that. But there's certain anecdotal things over the years, because one doctor will do this, do that. I said, do you know any modality that's 100%? No, you don't.
Yeah.
Because out there, they call it the medical arts, not medical science. I said, shot of penicillin may save your life, it may give me a reaction and kill me. I said, so it's still really a lot of variables in that.
Did Dr. Ziegler explain to you, or do you have any idea of what makes it different? Now, I'm not talking about just the cheap ones that you turn on in infomercials, but there are other therapeutic machines like this. Like, I wish I remembered off the top of my head. Like, I know my wife there's one that both my guy I go to, active release therapist I go to every week, he's familiar with it, and also my wife goes to a gym and they have a machine, and it also has therapeutic versus muscle building. And what they do it as, at least my wife does it as, when she's doing a certain, let's say you're doing a deadlift and you want to activate your hamstrings more, you're not pulling from that, you're not using the right muscles, they put these pads to it and they hook it up and it contracts those muscles, so it teaches them also like how to activate certain muscles that perhaps you're not activating properly. So I know there are other machines nowadays that are not just toys. Do you know how if it's different, or what? I don't really know enough about it. I was just wondering if you had aware of what made the Isotron different versus some of the toys, so to speak.
Well, you got you cast them aside, and then you got some. And they asked me when I was doing a demonstration with the Philadelphia Eagles, there was a lot more people in that room than I would have anticipated going up there. I just thought it was going to be the therapist and a few of the players or whatever. There's a lot of people there. And it turned out, I found out that night that there were people from the hospital, the University of Pennsylvania. And I was pleased to hear from the assistant trainer who told me, he said they were real impressed with what you had to show, on the thing there, because we talked about that. They asked me about, well, what do you think of the Medcalator? Just so happened that was one of the machines that passed through Dr. Ziegler's office. I said, that's one of the few machines that's accepted by the medical establishment.
What's the name of it?
Medcalator. Now, I don't know if it's still
okay. Yeah.
The name. I said, but you have those things. I said, and their application has a certain limitation to it and what it can do. I said, no, this machine. I said, I'd be a fool to stand here and tell you people that this thing can do anything and everything. I said, but where it holds its sway, there's nothing that I know of in the world that can approach it. And they liked that. I remember that because they liked that comment that I had made on that. And again, me feeling that I have limitations and, now tell your doctor to give you diarrhea.
Yeah. It
would be so asinine of me to go down that road. But where I do know how to use it and I'm proud of, I've had a lot of years now, I've never hurt anybody with that machine because I take it very seriously. And they'll ask you the obvious questions. Say, can that hurt somebody? You're damn right it can. Anything potent enough that can help you, abused, misused, or whatever, like this machine, damn right it can hurt you. So that's my interpretation on the short end on that part. But
just it's how it's power. It's the powerful. That's the reason.
It's ungodly powerful. I mean, like I told you. I mean, it's it's as everybody. And here's one thing that the guy up in, when I was in New York, it was a medical doctor, heard it. That got his attention. I said, everybody hears about the 115-pound woman pulling a 1,500-pound car off her son. Her husband might be rushing to get a jack. She's too stupid to know that she can't move that, and she moves it. Now, you might hear of incidents like that every couple of years in a population of billions of people. I said, and what is mind-blowing to me with the Isotron is it can take your muscles to that potential time and time and time again without any rush of adrenaline or any panic, or it can take you to that potential time again. And all these years later, I'm still blown away by that prospect.
Did you, was there any tendon or ligament problems because you hear about people like when they're developed, like in steroids, you hear about sometimes the muscles develop faster than the tendons, ligaments, so people hurt themselves that way. I'm just thinking if you're tensing these muscles more than they're used to, that there might be some strains or something.
You brought that up, and I thought that that's the best question of the day so far, is that the doctor had discussions with other physicians as to where it doesn't affect, it doesn't do this, doesn't do that. Well, here's something for discussion, he would say. He says, you got Bill St. John, who came from 5 other siblings that are of no consequence physically out there than anybody else. But here he is. He could do supports with 1,500 pounds on his back. He can do, and there's certain things that would require more than just muscle strength. It would go with bone density, and it would go with tendons and ligaments, and things that you may not really know is worthy of further study. So, he says you could take him. He's the extreme. You can say, what, he's just an eyeball in the house? No, he trains with weights. He dedicates his time and habits and everything to things that his siblings don't. So there is a difference there. And I thought that was kind of interesting way back when, and I never would even thought to put up.
How did Dr. Ziegler pass away? Cancer?
No.
No. What was it?
Heart disease.
Oh, heart disease.
And when I got down there, you'd see him sitting there puffing on a cigarette. You'd see him that night out there drinking, raising hell, or whatever he would do. And his father was the exact opposite, very sedate, very established. But the military and a whole big Second World War has a lot to do with convoluting your persona, I guess, to say. And he didn't wear that with any badge of honor or anything like that. He picked up with, because I preached to my dad, who was in the South Pacific, and they would just tell me to shut the hell up. Ziegler would be kinder to me and saying, well, Bill, me having a beer or smoking a cigarette 30-some years ago and somebody telling me that, gee, that's not good for your lungs, he said, I didn't know if I was going to be alive that afternoon, let alone 33 years from now.
Yeah.
And he said that's where that was at. But he was boisterous. He was loud. He was complex, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all the things I found. And then I burnished my preachy attitude over the years to knowing, or at least trying to know, what they went through. And he made no apologies for it, because you'd hear say, well, he was nothing but he was, and you can find faults with every person that ever walked this earth and do the critiques and everything. But I think he lent to and left the place better than when he came into the place.
Definitely sounds like an interesting human being, for sure. Smart man.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating.
So when he passed away, was it sudden then?
No, he was diminishing all the time. We were at a cookout down there late in his life. Now, I don't know how long it was before he passed, but a cookout, there was Smitty was there, Vern Weaver was there, John Grimek and his wife was there. And what a great day that was. Fun day. But that night, when everybody left and I was still there, and he was, they had to shoot him up with morphine. He was having bad issues at the time, but he had a good day. And, it was a diminished health that he had. It was, between the heart and, the reemergence of the agony of these war wounds and everything that he had. So,
Did he ever talk to you about his legacy or about the Isotron or anything? How did you end up with it?
He told his daughter, because Jared, there were so many people trying to manipulate him or outright steal the item, and a machine was stolen from two people that I know, and I can't mention their names, but is a thing that happened there. The week that he died, he told his daughter, he says, take Bill St. John, get that machine and do something with the damn thing. Because he kept it close to his vest for the reason there were manipulations and people trying to steal it and every other thing. And even the machine that I have is encased in a certain oxy that if you try to dissect it, you destroy it. Mm. And all the drawings and assembly notes were misplaced and never found.
Hey, yeah.
Now, I look at this thing in the extreme. I said, well, it's not splitting the atom, but it is a little complex. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be something, when it's duplicated, it has to be correct. And that's where that's at.
I'm sure nowadays it would also have to be like duplicated with like safeguards. There's probably like limits of electricity and all this type of thing.
Well, that's built into it as far as informers and things like that. But even with the solution now, when he was working in the White House and the Department of the Navy with the Marine Corps, and they loved.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that, but yes, so he was actually doing. You can maybe go into a little. He was administering treatment to President Kennedy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is not publicized anywhere because he was called in as a consulting physician with the attendant secrecy or confidentiality with it.
Yeah, I don't think they openly talked about his back pains and stuff until years later. This is my understanding anyway.
No.
Yeah.
And I remember Bill March telling me he was pulling up to the driveway, going down there one time before I came along. And guy with the suit there, he says, your name and your business here and identification. And March was rough shot. He said, who the hell are you? Mm-hmm. And he said, March told me this himself, he showed him his ID was Secret Service. He said, well, I'm Bill March. He says, yes, you are expected, but I still require to see your identification. What the hell's all this about? He said, I went in the office and there was Robert F. Kennedy in there. He said, he said, I don't usually get it, but that got my attention. He said,
wow. Well, I think that's we're coming to a good ending spot here. We've kind of gone through your life with an Iron Game, and what have you? And we talked about the Isotron and Ziegler and Isometrics and Bill March and your bodybuilding career. Maybe just tell us just a little bit more about just ending with outside of how you kind of tapered off from the Iron Game and how you lived what you did in your later years. Just briefly, I don't know what this. And our story there ends around 1982 or something like that. So that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just myself, you try to, live out a good life, say goodbye to people that you love that are leaving you, and, have a good philosophy and gratitude, I would say, for the people that I was engaged with, and, with the athletics part of it. And not only just the athletics, is that you gain something from it that you might have given a little bit back, because it sorely needs giving back with the scandal that's been abuses that are there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I constantly got to buttress myself with thoughts of who I engaged with, like between Bill Pearl, proud to have had him as a good friend, and John Grimek, and the bunch of people that I met that I'm just so grateful for, is to be involved with. And
I mean, those two right there, two legends right there, really.
Well, it meant a lot to me. It was just one little interesting thing. A friend of mine I graduated school from, we were best friends, and he played football for University of South Carolina. And fast forward, his son is working for AmeriFit or something. I forget, one of the big companies. And he calls me one night, this friend of mine. He said, my son out in California, he's in San Diego at a convention. He said, guess who he's with? He's with Bill Pearl. I said, when did you talk to him? He said, just now. I said, call him back. See if he can call. I said, I like this. I said, I hadn't talked to Bill in a while. I said, he call. He calls, and I'm reading between the lines. He said, no, he just, whatever happened, I forget it, but he couldn't call him. But then what happened was later that night, because Pearl was like an icon to this company, and he's sitting at the same table at the banquet that they had with Bill Pearl. He's sitting next to Bill Pearl. He's like thrilled about it. And just very coyly, he said, Bill, he says, let me ask you something. He says, the name Bill St. John mean anything to you? He said, it means a lot to me. But he said, Bill and I are good friends. He went off on a litany of good things said about, from Bill to me. And and he calls me, all right, okay. I says, that's a little story that I kind of like, because the kid was kind of, didn't want to embarrass himself by, but I liked to be with the people that were really worthwhile with it, and I think I was, between, Bill March and Bill Pearl, John Grimek, as I know, and then the capstone being John Ziegler, and how much I learned off of him. I mean, he brought me into his world, into his home, and we traveled all over these United States together. And Jared, he told me, we're taking off one time. He said, Bill, he said, just think about it. He said, if things pan out the way we hope, he says, how many people you can help with it. And I'm still sitting there in the plane, ka-ching, 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 with the cash register ringing in my head. And at least I could say I morphed into that attitude over the years. That if this thing never made 10 cents for me, but it would be a redemption of all I believed in over the years. And that means a lot to me right there. And to feel I had some worth, in myself in the sport, and, all that. Yeah,
that is, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I mean, it's definitely a very interesting story, and I'm glad it's a story that, life you lived, and also these always people you interacted with, and health and the people you helped. So I found that all very, very interesting and enjoyable. So, and I appreciate you sharing that story. And I think that's a great place to end this. Unless you have anything else you want to add that we maybe left out.
The way I'll end it is with my title of respect for people of your caste is Dr. Jarrett. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was enlightening. It was educational for me and a reminder to me of things I forgot about over the years.
Yeah, I hope this is something also that I'll put this together. It'll probably take me a little while. I'll probably put some pictures up around it of the various people we talked about as you're speaking. So it'll probably take me a few weeks, but I think it's something good, not just to get out there on record, but I think it's good for your family. It's good for to have that on record if people can look on it, and it's nice to get it all there together. So I hope you find some value in that as well. So
and that is anything in the future. There's blanks you want to fill, or if you ever want to talk to me again, you're more than welcome. You gained 100% of my confidence that you're, a righteous guy.
I'm just listening. I'm just a good listener, and I happen to know. I'm a big fan of the Iron Game and its history, so I happen to know just enough of the history to know what you're talking about and put the pieces together, and hopefully try to make it clear for people who aren't as familiar. So, thank you, and we'll talk again soon. And I really appreciate it. Have a good one.
We'll talk soon, and be safe, Doctor. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Take care. Bye.